Talofa lava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susanna Suisuki. Coming up,
will actually experience a significant drop in demand.
US trade wars could impact Pacific economies, also raising awareness of leprosy in Papua New Guinea, and
we're here to showcase to the world that Samoan people, Samoan women and people can do it too, you know.
we caught up with the reigning Miss Global Samoa. A senior economist says Pacific tourism could take an indirect hit from US President Donald Trump's escalating trade wars. President Trump has this week pledged to impose more tariffs since his move to introduce import taxes on steel and aluminium entering the US. This after earlier raising tariffs on all goods imported from China by 20% and putting a 25% tax on products from Canada and Mexico, some of which are now delayed until April. A senior economist at the Australian think tank, Lowy Institute's Alexandre Dayant, says these policies will likely see a compression in the global economy, which will have serious consequences for Pacific economies. He spoke to Koroi Hawkins about some of the potential impacts.
Look, the reality is that with everything that Trump does, there is a bit of uncertainty as to what will actually be implemented. So far, what we saw is that in terms of tariffs and trade wars, as you said, most of the tariffs are actually directed at the countries that have this kind of trading imbalances with the United States, so like China, Canada, and Mexico. Although, like for Canada and Mexico, it looks like Trump is announcing tariffs and then like suspending them and then implementing them again. I mean, it's a bit murky what's happening over there. What's interesting is that despite the fact that the tariffs that the US is implementing on China or is imposing on China is ideally to impact the Chinese markets. It will also impact the US market as well. And so it means that, for countries that depend on the US or China's demand for products or services, we can expect that actually this demand will contract. And what this means for the Pacific is that there is a risk that the tariffs might actually impact the Chinese economy. If those tariffs, basically translate into a kind of compression of the Chinese domestic demand or international demand for that matters of products or services, then this means that some of the countries that are exporting their product to China or to the United States as well will actually experience a significant drop in demand. Now, this can impact many countries because China is importing, goods and services for many countries. But when you look at the Pacific, it might actually impact specific countries as well in the Pacific, notably like the countries that are, the big commodity exporters. China is the main trading partner for most of the Pacific Island countries. But for some of those economies, China is even a bigger partner than others. And so, for instance, like for Papua New Guinea, for Papua New Guinea, China basically imports a lot of natural gas and other raw materials from this country. Solomon Islands as well sends a lot of timber to China, but to other countries as well, obviously to Malaysia and so forth. And so, I think those countries will primarily be basically impacted by the tariffs that the Trump administration is actually imposing on the United States. But the important thing I would say is that it's not just about the depreciation of demand for commodities that will impact the Pacific. Many Pacific Island countries rely on tourism, for instance. And when you look at the Pacific, I think it's like Fiji and Vanuatu and Palau as well. Actually, most of their domestic revenues is actually coming from tourism activities. Now, like if you look at the impact of tariffs, will probably mean that there will be, you know, a compression of a slowdown of the economies of China or the United States. And, you know, when you look at the composition of tourists, the composition of binationalities of the tourism sectors in the Pacific, a lot of them are coming from the United States. Some of them are coming from China as well. And you could expect that if the economy is going, you know, badly in the US, then there might be, like, Americans might have less money to spend to travel overseas, to travel to the Pacific. And therefore, there would be also an impact in the region through this as well.
In terms of you mentioned the countries that rely heavily on China there, or the North Pacific, who are very linked in with the US economy. What is the likely impact for the COFA states, compact states, and those in free association with the United States?
Yeah, so this, I think the COFA states, you're right, like they're linked with the US in some ways, but I think more than their trade relationship, it's more, you know, they rely more on the funding for the COFA, you know, the Compact of Free Association, which actually those fundings are provided by mostly the Department of Interior. A little bit is provided by USAID. And you're right that at the moment, you know, like the Trump administration decided to basically reevaluate the alignment of many of those overseas funding, to make sure that those fundings were actually aligned with the US's strategic interests, and that you know, they were making. I think Marco Rubio said that he wanted to make sure that all those investments were actually making the United States safer, stronger, and more prosperous. And at the moment, all of this funding is actually frozen. I mean, most of this funding is frozen. There are some exemptions for humanitarian aid. What I expect will happen is that the funding for the COFA states will actually continue going forward once the review will be finished, because the COFA actually are making the United States stronger and safer. They are, you know, allowing the United States to have this kind of military oversight in those islands. And, you know, when you look at the geographical situation of those countries in terms of in relationship between China and the United States, they provide the US with this kind of buffer. It's called the First Island Chain, a buffer to any Chinese influence, if you will, or Chinese attack. And so yes, I think that the funding for the COFA states will actually you know, continue. There might be some part of the funding that will probably be scratched, especially those that are provided by USAID. But again, they're pretty small in comparison to the huge amount that the US is transferring every year. You know, like through the Compact, mostly through the Department of Interior.
A comprehensive training program in Papua New Guinea is putting an end to the stigma surrounding leprosy. According to the Leprosy Mission New Zealand, PNG records around 500 diagnosed cases of leprosy a year, but thousands go undiagnosed. I spoke with the International Programs Manager, Jaslyn Clare, about the Preventative Health and Community Empowerment, or PHASE program.
We work in the Pacific, especially in Bougainville and PNG, and also now in Kiribati. So, as you know, health is quite under-resourced in the Pacific Islands. So we're trying to build a culture of strong preventative health system so that less people need to go to the health facilities. And this is done through regular awareness at a community level, where we have one male and a female volunteer at the community level, and they refer patients to the nearest health posts. So there's a lot of awareness around leprosy, TB, malaria, maternal health, child health, immunization, depending on the needs of the area.
I just read on the website that there are 500 cases that are diagnosed in Papua New Guinea and thousands more go undiagnosed. Why are there so many cases of leprosy in PNG? Well, but first of all, what is leprosy? Because I hear it in the Bible, and you know, it's one of those diseases that you don't really hear much of in New Zealand. But from what I read on the website, it's an epidemic. I don't know if that's the right word, but
it's surely like quite a health concern in the Pacific. So it is caused by a bacteria called microleprae. and it is transmitted through water droplets through the respiratory tract. But the thing is, most of us have a natural immunity towards leprosy. It's like a disease of the poor, like where there's poverty, overcrowding, poor hygiene and sanitation. That's where leprosy thrives. In the Pacific now, what we see is like there are more child cases. Leprosy bacteria can lie dormant in the system for 5 to 10 years, and you don't really see the early signs and symptoms. And also, as you may be aware about stigma and discrimination around leprosy. It's not easy for people affected by leprosy or those suspected cases to come to a health facility because they too fear that they will be shunned away at the community level. And there's a lot of discrimination that also happens. So that's why the preventative health program, through that program, we raise awareness at a community level to normalize leprosy and just empower communities and the leaders and people to come forward if they have like first signs of leprosy.
Yeah, so how do you empower women in PNG through this program?
So we have different activities for women. So we've got a very strong gender-based program embedded in the FACE program. So we do special trainings on gender-based violence and engaging men in challenging gender-based violence as well. We work with community leaders because we don't want to just focus on women. That's not going to change the equation. So we need active engagement from community leaders and men to challenge the discriminatory practices. And also through the program, what we are strongly focusing on is setting up referral pathways for survivors of gender-based violence. And we work through a network of other INGOs, NGOs, and government agencies in country. So I was recently in PNG and I met with a wonderful volunteer who's a survivor of gender-based violence. Her husband struck her with a machete, and she moved from one community to another. And again, she was a woman affected by leprosy, so the discrimination is double. And now she's become a change agent, and she's referring other women to safe houses in PNG.
Not only gender-based violence is a problem in PNG, but sorcery-related violence is also an issue, right?
Yes, it's quite common.
Yeah, does the program address sorcery-based violence?
Absolutely. We've got a special funding recently through UNDP, and then it's again embedded in the FACE program. Sorcery-related accusations are quite common in PNG and also Bougainville. So what we're trying to do is raise awareness and also actively engage community leaders so that, if there are cases like that, through regular awareness, people don't go to the traditional routes, but the victims feel free to contact local leaders who are embedded in the communities and also have watchdogs in place, community volunteers and leaders who keep an eye on these cases.
How do you overcome cultural barriers when it comes to rolling out this program in a place like PNG that has so many languages?
It has. So we've been quite intentional in having volunteers from particular, they're based in the communities and from specific provinces and community clusters. So we use health as an entry point and we engage leaders. And then we select volunteers who are from the community, speak the language, know the culture, and are aware of the cultural practices. And then we build capacity of volunteers over a period of time. And then it's interlinked. We're working with volunteers, leaders, and then we've got our district facilitators who, again, work with the government. So it's like a multi-level approach, it's like bottoms-up approach where you reconnecting them with the right people, government agencies, and making sure they have the right awareness-related materials, resources, and constant messaging around gender and health.
I know that this program, you're working closely with people on the community and village level, but what's been the response from local government leaders towards FACE program?
So we've actually signed an MOU just last week with the Department of Community Government in PNG. We've got through the program, we work very closely with the Department of Health in country, Bougainville, wherever we work through the FACE program. So the program is kind of the material and the designing of the messaging is in collaboration with the Department of Health. Our volunteers work very closely with the local health facilities, so it's a good partnership with the health at local and provincial levels.
Miss Global Samoa Nicolina Ah Kuoi says it felt surreal when she made the top 20 at this year's Miss Global pageant held in Thailand. The pageant ran over 3 weeks, with the final crowning night just over the weekend. There were 60 contestants, and Miss Global Vietnam took out the competition and the glory. For Miss Ah Kuoi, stepping onto the Miss Global stage wasn't just about competing. It was about promoting her home country and reshaping perceptions of Samoan women in international pageantry. She spoke with Grace Fever Eye.
Whakataitele lava, Nicolina, for your time. I appreciate it. I understand it's 9 o'clock a.m. over there in Thailand. It's currently 3 o'clock here in New Zealand. Now, just, congratulations, first of all, on making the top 20. You were
Thank
the
you.
only Pacific Islander and you represented Oceania in the top 20. What were your thoughts, while being up on that stage? And walk me through, how each day went for you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Grace, for taking the time to interview me, and also thank you so much for the congratulations. Um, Honestly, when they announced me as one of the top 20, and seeing that I was the only one from the Pacific to make it up to top 20, it felt surreal. Like I was like, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm actually moving on to the next step. Even though like it felt like an honor, to be representing Oceania, not just myself, but also my fellow Pacific sisters that were able to compete also. Um, I never saw it as just me going on to the next level. It's me taking everyone, not just our Samoan people, but also our fellow neighboring countries in the Pacific. So it was truly an honor, and I really hope that I made everyone proud, especially my our Polynesian and Oceania community.
Awesome. I know that this isn't a traditional competition or pageant like Miss Samoa and Miss South Pacific. And the categories also are quite different from traditional wear to sarong wear. How
Yeah,
did you overcome those cultural barriers? Because, in our culture, it's like, oh, we don't really kind of wear those kind of clothes. But yeah,
yeah.
walk me through that.
Oh my God, there's so many. Um, okay, long story short, I mean, Hey Lani really opened up our people's minds to what they wear here at Miss Global and every other international pageants in terms of wearing bikini and all these sort of gowns, revealing gowns. Hats off to Heilani for doing that. But for me personally, I I know I was raised uh in the culture. I was raised up in the island, so it was like a huge challenge for me. But with my family's support, always constantly reminding me that just because you wear these clothes doesn't make you doesn't change who you are. It's just part of the competition, and it's also something that we have to understand that when I agreed to take on this role, I knew what was coming. I knew what were some of the things that I had to do in order to participate, to be a part of this competition. And I feel like it's all about how you see it. It's not about what you wear, it's about who's wearing it. So throughout the competition, I was like, oh, it was nerve-wracking at first. That's what and during preliminary, I was a bit conserved, self-conserved. Like it was I wasn't really out there. Like I was a bit nervous. I was like, oh, what will people think? But at the end of the day, you just gotta believe in yourself. You just gotta people know you personally. My Samoan people love and support me, and I was like, you know what, just do it for your country. Do it like we're here to showcase to the world that Samoan people, Samoan women and people can do it too. It was a lot. but I try my best to like not let it get to me. Sometimes I'm like too much in my head where I'm like, oh no, this is this overthinking because I'm an overthinker. But I'm so grateful that I didn't really overthink this whole thing. But the top 20 bikini, it was a huge challenge for me. If you, I know a lot of you have been following along. For the first bikini that we did, I was like, oh yeah, it's okay, it's not that bad. And I really hope that I made each and every one of you proud. It's all thanks to God for bringing us this far. And if it weren't for your continued support, also Samoa, I would not have been where I am today.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple, and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.